So welcome everyone to the Warrior Women in Business podcast. We're on episode 15. For those of you that are just tuning in and don't know anything about this podcast, my name is Jasmine Sandler, and I'm your host and producer of the podcast and our event series, of which we're going to talk about today. So Warrior Women in Business, our mission is to really help women that want to support other women in an authentic way, whether it's in business or in the home. And today I'm very, very excited to have our guest today, Cecile Noel from the Mayor's Office to End Gender-Based and Domestic Violence. Hopefully I said that correctly. So say hi, Cecile.
Hi. Jasmine, thank you for having me here. It's really wonderful to be here on this Domestic Violence Awareness Month to be able to talk about this very, very important issue.
Yes, it is. So I want to get started by giving my audience a little bit of a background about your bio. As I do with all my guests, I usually screw it up and have you expand on it.
Okay.
I mean, you just have such a resume here, so I'm just going to give a little bit of background. So Cecile Noel was appointed Commissioner of the Mayor's Office to End Domestic Violence and Gender-Based Violence, which is the hashtag, very important for everyone. The hashtag is hashtag ENDGBV, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's very important that we follow that hashtag. In October 2015.
Yes.
The office was established by New York City Charter in 2001. Mm-hmm. Very important year in New York.
Yes.
And its responsibilities and authority to address intimate partner violence and elder abuse were expanded by Executive Order 36 to include sexual assault, which we talked about actually with Deborah Max on our last Warrior Woman in Business episode. Yes, we did. Stalking and human trafficking in September 2018. NYCBV has a current annual operating budget of $20 million, and they're really helping the city and its programs. And I'm going to skip right past NGB and talk a little bit about you in her prior position as the Executive Deputy Commissioner for the Human Resources Administration, the HRA. Right. Emergency Intervention Services. Commissioner Noel managed programs with a total operating budget of $180 million, and in addition to 500 staff. I don't know how you did it. I can barely manage 2 people. Under her leadership, expansions were accomplished in both residential and non-residential services for domestic violence survivors across the network of 52 New York City funded domestic violence shelters, of which I didn't know that those existed. So. Yes. Let's get right into it because I don't want to read off of a piece of paper.
That sounds fine.
So can you give a little bit more about your background? Specifically, tell the story of how you got here today.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you. And in just thinking about my background and coming to this podcast, I think what I knew early on after graduating from college is that I love working with people. And I knew I wanted to be in a people-facing kind of industry, and I also really love helping to whatever degree I can. Yeah. And I had a taste of social services. I spent some time abroad in development work and really enjoyed doing that kind of work. Came back and went to social work school. And for me, that was a turning point in realizing that I wanted to not only devote myself to this kind of work, but also to really working to see how we can really address some really severe issues, one being domestic violence, which came to the forefront for me when I began working out of social work school in the medical arena. And seeing survivors really present to the emergency room with injuries, severe injuries that maybe we were not doing the best job in addressing or even asking at that time.
I'm sure. What year was that?
This is now in the 80s. Right?
Oh, wow.
Early 80s.
Yeah, I can imagine that there was a lot of quietness around
that we weren't addressing as fully as we could, right? And so I started working for the Health and Hospitals Corporation, or the public hospital system, and had the opportunity there to really begin to help think about how we address these issues from a policy perspective, looking at not only domestic violence, but sexual assault, elder abuse, and child abuse. All of these things present often in a healthcare setting initially. Right. Abusers will often allow their victims to get medical treatment when they won't allow anything else. They'll take them to hospitals and have them really have their healthcare needs addressed. But if no one is really asking in that setting, we were really losing a key opportunity to provide help. and let survivors know that they're not alone and that help is available. And so I really looked at how we could do that differently. And with the support of the then, health and hospitals, we rolled out domestic violence coordinators in every public hospital at that time, which were individuals put there so that they could, in fact, connect with survivors and let them know that services are available, that someone is here to hear you and really respond to this critical need, both for you and your family.
Yeah, well, that's tremendous. I mean, I think that when we were talking before the show, it's a lot about awareness.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where it starts, right? With these issues: domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse.
That's right.
It starts with the awareness. So, beyond the awareness in that one-to-one, as we talked about, I actually do healthcare marketing, in that one-to-one medical setting, then how have you seen, because that was early on, right?
That was early on.
So how have you seen that expand from a quiet conversation with, let's say, a doctor or a nurse and a patient to now something where it's more out in the public and in the community? Like, what's going on?
What clearly is going on is much more awareness. We've done public service campaigns, but also really assuring survivors out there that help is available, more awareness, more funding to agencies so they can also do more awareness. I am privileged to work in an administration under the de Blasio administration that clearly understands the nexus and importance of this issue and has invested over $11 million just recently towards expanding these services and thinking more broadly about how we reach survivors. How do we do community outreach? How do we let folks know that help is available? Domestic violence is different. Intimate partner violence is different. It happens behind closed doors.
Right, versus
it happens away from public view. Sexual assault happens away from public view. It happens in often the most intimate kinds of settings, our homes, our relationships with people that we trust and often love.
Absolutely. So question a little bit about domestic violence awareness and support versus support of other charity organizations. I would assume that there's a different style of communication that comes with talking about domestic violence versus, let's say, breast cancer. It's kind of out there. So has it been a challenge? This is my own personal opinion. Has it been a challenge to get people to rally behind the support of domestic violence versus some of these larger, I guess, charitable efforts?
I think that what we do and what we have to do is just continue to push our message in every way possible. Again, as I said earlier, it's often harder for survivors to come out. There's stigma. Often there's victim blaming. There's a lot of stigma associated often with experiencing this. And we have to get beyond that. And we have to help survivors get beyond that. And so I think that where we talk about breast cancer and we talk about these other things, folks don't get that same kind of stigma as they often do when they talk about being a survivor. Right. And so that's part of our challenge in raising awareness and having everyone else understand that we should listen to survivors without judgment. Without judgment. Right,
without judgment. So now, I'm assuming that most of the survivors are women. Have you seen times when men are the victims? It's something that never gets talked about, so that's just why I wanted to bring it up today. Or cases in the gay community that now that I have been working very hard to put on this event, I see that there's just issues everywhere. So can you talk about some stats?
So what we know from the CDC is that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Report that having experienced intimate partner violence in their lifetime, that's significant. We also know that this affects every community. If you're straight, if you're gay, lesbian, transgender, gender nonconforming communities, this issue has no socioeconomic boundaries and no ethnic boundaries. We have communities that experience this across the spectrum. Folks who are affluent and folks who are not.
That is true.
So that it clearly is an issue that crosses all of these boundaries. And in our outreach about that, we need to be clear about that. It's not the other. It's not the other person. It's us.
It's us. Wow,
It's us.
that's interesting. I like what you said about affluent versus non-affluent,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there is this perception
Mm-hmm.
that it's more something amongst the poor people,
Mm-hmm.
which I can tell you, you know my song and my background. It
Yeah.
is not.
That's right.
So, so yeah, I think that is just an important thing for people to understand, that it's across all spectrums,
Yes, it is.
and it can be everyone.
Yes.
And that gets to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a problem, and I love that you're doing something about it. Finally,
Mm-hmm.
I think, my own personal opinion. So it's a problem that's been going on for a long time. Like you said, a lot of times it's behind closed doors, and there is this victim blaming thing that happens.
That's right.
Right. So the question that I have is how, because you're in this involved with this every single day. So how do you see domestic violence, sexual abuse, and all these other issues affecting the community at large? Like, where do you see that being a problem in kind of like everyday life, whether it's, you know, we talked about before, like in the workspace. Talk about that. Like,
Okay.
what happens to a victim or a survivor in the workspace? How are he or she treated?
One of the things that I think that we need to make sure, and especially for a lot of your viewers who are entrepreneurs and
Right.
and often women in business and doing amazing things out
Absolutely.
there, is that if you hire other women, you need to be concerned about this, right? 1 in 4. That means that
That's
1 in 4.
That's a crazy stat.
1 in 4.
25% of
That's
all
right.
relationships. Wow.
That's right.
Crazy.
So we need to understand that abuse causes loss of work days, that it costs businesses millions of dollars each year. That part of the abuse is also making sure sometimes that women are unemployed or underemployed, or causing them to lose their employment. And if they are employed, it also means often financial abuse by taking the money and not allowing one to have access to those resources. But it all begins with a conversation and recognition, if you are in business, that I need to be concerned about this. For my employees, I need to have a policy in place that assures that if someone is experiencing this, they know as their employer that they can come forward, and we have supports and we will work with them around what that might mean. And so that, I believe, is particularly important. Women to women, right? And as survivors,
That's what this
right,
show is
right,
about,
right.
women supporting women.
And although we know that it
Yeah.
affects many communities across the board, it disproportionately impacts women.
Right, of course.
It disproportionately impacts women.
So let's talk now about the support.
Okay.
Let's talk about what is, because we want to know.
Okay.
We want to know, what is the city doing? Like, maybe you could give some examples
I will.
and talk about some of the programs.
I'll be happy to do that.
So talk a little bit about what the city does to support
So,
these women.
Again, I have the privilege in just working in an amazing administration. First of all, one, if you're experiencing domestic violence and you're in danger, of course, you should reach out and call the police and make sure you're safe. But we also run a New York City domestic violence hotline, right? That you can get information and resources and access to domestic violence shelters. So there are specialized domestic violence shelters all across the city. For
I have a
survivors.
question. Are they part of other shelters, or they're their own
They're their
entity?
own entity,
That's
own
great.
system,
Wow.
separate and apart, where survivors can go if they cannot stay at home and they're in danger. That's a system that's there to serve them. My office, established in 2001, and also oversees a group of services. So what do? We do policies and legislation to promote the safety and security of survivors, to make sure that their voice is heard in terms of our policy, and how we work with the police and how the police respond when they come into a home. We work with district attorneys' offices and other agencies across the city to coordinate policy, to think about best practices in terms of being able to serve survivors when they come forward and reach them wherever they are. So we do that. We do outreach in communities. So we do that as well. We do research, so we conduct research and do, so if you go to our website, we have a lot of research around the issues of not only domestic violence, but sexual assault, family violence, all of these issues that intersect with our work. And we have we oversee the Family Justice Centers, which are located in every borough. And the Family Justice Centers are wonderful spaces where survivors have services all in one place. So we
That's
are
great.
co-located. Often with the district attorney's offices, so that should you choose to go through a criminal process, you can do that easily. But the services are there even if you don't. So what services are there? We have advocates. We have civil legal services.
great.
We have mental health services. We have wellness services. We have services for children as well. So it is a wealth of services and investment that the city has made in ensuring that survivors can come forward and can receive their services in a trauma-informed, client-centered way. And this is in every borough. And so that's one place where definitely a survivor can come in and receive services right away and understand that help is available. We're also doing a lot of work on the prevention front to think about, how do we really end this? How do we really end this issue?
Right.
And it begins with thinking about our young people and what are we doing with young people? How are we thinking about how young people are socialized and changing that? How can we help young people understand both healthy behaviors in a relationship and unhealthy behaviors? And how can we help them navigate issues like consent for young men and young women who are now often experiencing their first sexual relationships? How do we help them really navigate those waters that often aren't discussed openly? There's still so many taboos around talking about intimacy and sex and what does that mean. And we need to pull that back. We need to have these conversations. They are important for the well-being of our young people as well as for their future. And that's what we're doing in many high schools and middle schools in the city. And we want to grow that work as much as possible. But it begins with conversations with our young people so that they don't become abusers or victims in their futures.
Oh, wow. Well, that's amazing. So for folks that want to get involved, what's the website? Can you just
Our website is ENDGBV altogether .nyc.gov. You can go there. So if you think of our office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, just take each of those initials.
Perfect, yeah.
And that's who we are. You can go to our website and get more information on our programming and all of what we do there. Resources, we recently launched our amazing our interactive resource directory, which provides resources on not only domestic violence, but on sexual assault, trafficking, stalking. So there's a wealth of information, and you can search by it. So it is an interactive portal that you can search by different topics, based on where you live, based on your zip code, what you're looking for, all across the city. And we've also made major investments in community-based organizations who know communities, who understand them, who want to reach. We want to reach folks where they are, in the language that they speak, and in the ways that they do that. The services at the Family Justice Center are free. They're confidential, regardless of your immigration status, gender identity, or expression. So this is a wealth of investment and services offered to survivors with the hope that they'll come in and really access this and really help address the situations that they're in.
Wow, that's amazing. Honestly, congratulations, because it's come really far, right?
It has.
I think the whole support around domestic violence has come very far.
It has, and we owe that to just the commitment of both our administration and our mayor and everyone who really understands the importance of both survivors. Think about it. Home is supposed to be a safe and
comfortable
wonderful
place,
nurturing place.
Supposed to be.
Supposed to be. And when it isn't, we need to help figure out how we reach those folks and get help to those families.
So one more, thank you for explaining all of that, because I really hope if there is anyone out there that's in trouble or has been in trouble,
Yes.
that they reach out. I mean, the fact that it's free, it's confidential,
Absolutely.
and it's in multiple languages in our city where...
And in
it's
every borough.
In every borough,
In
including
every
Queens,
borough.
where we
That's
hold-
right. We live in
We're
Queens.
Queens people. We have to do this.
Here we are.
Yeah, so it's really important. So just so when we talk about New York City, which is such a melting pot, right? Another interesting kind of thing that I just thought about is, do you know the stat behind the differences in race when it comes to domestic violence? Is there, or is it just kind of all across the board? Do you
It's
research
all across
that?
the board. It's all across the board.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly some of our research looks at the impact by race, but every race is actually affected by this issue. And it is, it's here, it's international, it is an issue.
Right.
It is an issue for all communities.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
I
but
agree.
It's something that we need to work to change.
Well, I love that you're creating a safer world. Honestly, because as a person that witnessed domestic violence when I was a little girl, I think that that's what you're doing. You're creating like a safety net, and it's a wonderful thing. Yeah. So let's talk about international. Let's talk about our event, which I am so excited about, because, that little person, I'm trying to do something to help, and I hope through our event on December 9th, that hopefully everybody's going to come to, we're going to do something great. So that our event, December 9th, is an evening, it's a silent auction and art gala to support and end domestic violence, and it's supporting the international efforts against gender-based violence. So talk about what's happening internationally. Talk about those 16 days of international and what you guys are doing in that.
All right, so gender-based violence, think of it this way. There's a big category of gender-based violence, and domestic violence is one bucket within that. So within the bigger category, gender-based violence, you have domestic violence, you have sexual assault, you have stalking, you have human trafficking. All of that is a part of that. And so what was recognized to be October 25th, starting on, November 20,
right, you got it.
Right, November, sorry.
I know you're busy, so.
November 25th is the International Day across the world where we're looking at really the issues of gender-based violence, which predominantly women, and saying that this issue we're standing up against gender-based violence. When we take a look at some of the other issues, it's estimated that between 40 and 60 million folks are trafficked every year.
Unbelievable.
75% are women and girls.
Yeah.
All right.
It's terrible.
So there are other issues that fall into that bucket. So we also have things of forced marriage, and there's also female genital mutilation and cutting.
Right.
Also are all a part of this continuum, and it is a continuum of just gender-based violence.
Yeah.
So you can be a domestic violence survivor and also a survivor of sexual violence.
Sure.
Because sexual violence is often part of the domestic violence, or it could be outside of it. You can also be trafficked by an intimate partner. So these things, there's a continuum, there's also an intersection. Hence the expansion of our name, mission, and what we do. And so in recognition of this International Day, we in New York are also stepping forward to say we want to be a part of that conversation. This is an important conversation for the future of our girls, of our daughters, of our of our sisters and nieces. We need to be a part of that global conversation that is about how do we end gender-based violence? How do we really end that? And so it's an awareness, but it's also actual activities that will happen.
Yeah.
And so this silent auction, and Gail is one of them. And I thank you so much, Jasmine, for your support and understanding of just how important it is both to engage the business community around this. There's so many things you can do in just raising awareness within your office, within your companies around this very important issue, and connecting globally to the bigger world that we all live in now around this very important issue.
And the global world is getting smaller.
Exactly.
So on this, in this international 2 weeks, 16 days, right? So what are some of the other, because I just don't know, what are some of the other things that are going on outside of New York City, just so people know, maybe, because, I have people that watch and listen from all over the place.
Okay, so countries around the world will commemorate that day in some way.
Okay.
Some of them bring the schoolgirls out and make messages and signs
Oh,
to
that's
end
nice.
to end gender-based violence here in New York City. We're looking forward to the auction. We will also be doing some roundtables
Okay.
with different communities talking about that. We're also looking at doing a small conference that will again highlight that
that's good.
issue. So we're in the stages of planning what we're doing for that time period. But again, it's galvanizing communities in New York City to recognize both the issue and the connection to the global piece of it, and
Yeah.
we think that's so important. So we're just coming out of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is national.
Which ends on Friday.
The
Right.
31st is tomorrow.
Oh,
right?
Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween.
Yeah, Halloween is tomorrow.
It is tomorrow. It ends tomorrow, and then we have a little break, and then we go into 16 days. But again, it's New York City recognizing both. One, I think also New York City is special because we have the UN. We have this international
Right.
presence that
Absolutely.
always seems to be here with us, and we're seen as like the city,
capital of the world.
capital of the world.
I know, it's
What
true.
better place to recognize
Absolutely.
and really bring greater awareness to this very important issue than in the capital of the world, New York City.
I agree with
So,
you. So let's, I know we only have a couple minutes left.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about December 9th.
Yes.
And I like that you said that companies can get involved because I
Yes.
have been in my outreach to put together this event on December 9th. You know, I've been talking to different companies about getting involved. So, you know, first let's just talk about, I just want you to expand a little bit on how companies have gotten involved with supporting domestic violence events. You know, what's that conversation, or any examples of maybe a company in New York that's done something interesting?
Well, I can't actually give you an example off the top of my
Okay.
head, but clearly companies can. And they can begin by thinking about their own internal policies,
Okay.
how they support survivors, what they can do. And they can also get involved. They can get involved and make connections to community-based organizations that
good
do this
idea.
work.
Yeah.
Right? So if you go to our website, there are just so many community-based organizations. So if you are, let's say this is a major law firm, this major law firm can connect with a community-based organization that provides legal services
Absolutely.
for domestic violence
Oh,
survivors who
right.
often need matrimonial services, sometimes immigration services. If you are a company that does, I don't know, sells dresses, let's say,
Yeah.
I don't know, or creates clothing.
Right.
There are lots of ways that you can connect with organizations that run domestic violence shelters. People don't recognize that when a domestic violence survivor leaves, often it's just with the clothes on their back, the clothes on the back of their children.
That's what I was talking about with survivors last
and
week.
they go into
That's
shelter
terrible.
with nothing, and have to rebuild their lives. And so companies who if you are in clothing, there are ways
Absolutely.
to connect to community-based organizations that run shelters that will be happy to connect with you
Of course.
to be able to help survivors in that way. So there's so many ways. Children, if you make toys, right? They leave with nothing. They leave often with the clothes on their back and maybe a few things that they've happened to grab. And they're rebuilding their lives. And I think if we stop a second and say, what if I had to leave my very nice home and only left with my pocketbook and maybe a few things that I was able to grab in a bag? How would that feel?
Right.
What would that mean? And how can you kind of envisioning that now? And there you understand what a survivor's going through and going into shelter and trying to rebuild your life this way. And so all of those things.
Lots of ways
and
that companies can help.
can connect, and you can connect with CBOs, and they would be more than happy to think about how they can work with you. So that's one very concrete way. Books. Think about that, books.
Oh, of course.
Important thing. We have children in shelter.
Yeah.
We have children in shelter. We have children in our Family Justice Centers who come every day, who are there, who we are trying to engage. These issues are really important, and when you just stop and step back a second, there's so much you can do, including volunteering time. You know, there are lots of companies who organize
yeah.
and connect with community-based
Right.
organizations. They do that a lot in the food world, right?
Yeah,
So they
that's
go
true.
and they serve at a pantry.
Yeah, that's right.
There are ways that you can connect and volunteer and serve domestic violence survivors in a one-to-one way. And these organizations that are out there are happy to help you think about how you can do that. There's so much need and so many ways that you can connect to that.
Well, I love it. So I'm glad you talked about that. So I want to talk about what we're going to do on December
Yes.
9th and how companies can get involved and how people can get involved. Because the purpose of the silent auction and art gala at the New York Arts Center, which is a gorgeous space, I can't wait for you to see it. It's 3 floors of international art, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we're having a silent auction. We have up to 20 of the artists actually creating specific art to support domestic violence. I'm really support
wonderful.
domestic violence awareness. I'm very excited about that. So that's
great.
part of the silent auction. We actually have some high-end luxury companies that, as of yesterday, have said, yes, Jasmine, after I've been bothering them so much. We will give you a gown. We will give you this and that. So we have the silent auction, but we also have opportunities for companies to give whatever. And to meet you, you'll be speaking.
Yes, I will be.
And we also, I think we're going to have hopefully some of the survivors through your Voices program. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So,
involved? Yeah.
What we also have is that we've created a group called Voices, and these are folks who have used our services at the Family Justice Center. Are survivors of domestic or intimate partner violence who are ready to step up and really speak about their experience because, again, we feel it's so important to center survivors in this conversation. We need to understand their experience. We need to hear, and we need to think about all of the connections that were helpful for them so that we can build and strengthen those connections. So they'll be there talking about that. But many of them are also creative. Like, you would be so surprised
They're gonna love
at the
They're gonna
creativity that happens sometimes as an outlet, as a safety mechanism, as a way to stay grounded. And so, and they'll be there also to really talk a little bit about their experience, but also share a little bit of their creativity that they found both in their survival, because remember, we don't say victims, we say survivors.
Don't say
because
victim.
they're
Negative
coming forward,
no.
and we want and we're striving for thriving.
Yeah, I love it.
And they are thriving and moving forward and talking about what that took to really rebuild their lives. So we are so happy that they'll be there. So supporting this is so important. The proceeds from this will help survivors from the Family Justice Centers with all kinds of things. And remember, we're serving survivors and their children. So that's often a really big spread in terms of need and things that they can need. So we hope that your community will really come out and support the event and really help raise funds for domestic violence survivors.
Yes, I think I'm excited about the event. I like that you talked about supporting the children, because there's a lot of women that are doing great things to support children.
Yeah.
Please come to the event. If you have any children's clothing, toys, books, contact me. We're accepting everything because we want to help these guys. So again, it's December 9th. Cecile and I will both be there speaking as a team. And New York Arts Center, you can find all the information on the Warrior Women in Business Facebook page. It's out there. I want to thank you so much for taking so much time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for just doing this for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I really hope that your audience really comes out to the event and that they really get involved in supporting survivors and really recognizing that the 1 in 4 statistic is real.
Yeah.
So that means that you know someone, and it could be family member,
your neighbor,
friend, neighbor,
like
colleague,
you hear things in the apartment building, like I do. I don't dismiss those things.
Those are real.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.